Today, we're going to look back at 25 recipes for Bonfire Night that used to fill Britain with the fragrance of smoke, butter, and trifle. It was the night when codes steamed next to open fires, and the only light that was brighter than the sparks was the light from the toffee. These were the tastes of a frigid November that didn't need pyrotechnics to feel light. Before councils put on fireworks shows or stores sold plastic trays of celebration food, the 5th of November was all about the street, the backyard, and the bonfire itself. After the war, Bonfire Night became a working-class holiday that families made from things they could spare. There was a lot of coal, and potatoes were even cheaper. Each community constructed its own mountain of scrap wood and fun. The National Food Survey for 1954 found that families in Northern England spent almost a tenth of their weekly food budget on only one night. Under festive use, there were sausages, trial, and tea. It was the one night a year when hunger and heat were perfectly balanced. Potatoes were the first thing to go on every campfire. Back then, foil was still new, but anyone who could afford a sheet wrapped it firmly over a big King Edward and shoved it deep into the burning coals. Some people used newspaper, which burned away and left the skin charred and the flesh soft as butter. When someone eventually got them out with a stick, the first hiss of steam escaping signified that dinner had survived the fire. In 1962, butter cost 9 cents a /4 pound, and even a small blob melting in the middle of a potato made it feel better. Kids clutched them in their mittens to keep warm and blew on each mouthful till the steam didn't hurt their lips anymore. Ash and salt on the same fork tasted really real. Sausages came next. Skewers could be garden canes, wire coat hangers, or even knitting needles. There was an expert on every block who said they knew the exact distance from flame to sausage for the best blistering. Most of them ended up split open, with one side charred and the other half uncooked, but no one cared. In 1960, pork sausages cost 1 shilling and 3 pence a pound, which was cheap enough to feed a whole family. The fragrance of sizzling fat blended with the smell of cold smoke and wet leaves. This smell is still in the national memory. For a lot of families, it was the only meat they had all week. They ate it standing up, with their faces lit up by the orange glow. Black peas, which were also termed parched peas in some parts of Yorkshire and Lanarkshire, gave out a different kind of warmth. At fairs, vendors sold them from big pots, putting them in paper cups and covering them in malt vinegar. They didn't look good at all, small, dark, and wrinkled. But the taste was pure comfort, sharp, smoky, and earthy. In the 1960s, Bolton Market sold more than half a ton per November. Each serving cost less than 6 pence, which is why they were so popular with miners and mill workers who didn't have a lot of money. The first bite always made my tongue burn. The next thing calmed it down. You could eat an entire cup while standing by the fire and still want more. Next came soups, which were generally poured from dented jugs or flasks. Thick pea or potato soup made from the bones and peels left over from Sunday supper and stretched to feed a lot of people. The sound of a ladle hitting a jug cut through the cacophony of pyrotechnics. A little murmur of benevolence in the cold. Moms gave out mugs that steamed up against red noses, and for a few minutes, everyone was quiet, focusing on the warmth that came from within. Cold board recordings showed that the temperature dropped close to freezing in early November 1958, but no one remembered how cold it was once they took their first sip of soup. People often made corned beef hash when they planned ahead. Chopped onions, potatoes, and pieces of canned meat were cooked together until the edges were crispy. The scent of onions covered up the metallic taste of the meat. Britain bought more than 200,000 tons of corned beef every year in the 1950s, mostly from Argentina. This made it one of the cheapest reliable proteins on the market. It tasted like luxury on Bonfire Night. Families who had a good pan fried it outside and served it right away. For everyone else, it came back from the tin and no one complained. By the end of the 1960s, convenience had started to sneak into the ritual. Instant mashed potatoes, canned beans, and sausages from the store took the place of the smoky improvisation of the past. The Gas Council's surveys of homes showed that the number of home-built bonfires went down steadily after 1972, when council displays became the norm. There were fewer flames, thus there were fewer potatoes roasted in genuine embers. But for a generation who grew up seeing their supper become red before they ate it, Bonfire Night was still the best kind of feast, cheap, social, and unforgettable. The first fragrance of Bonfire Night was smoke, and the second was sugar. There was a different kind of trial toffee in each house. Moms cooked dark syrup until the air was thick and acrid. To test the concoction, they dropped a little into cold water to see if it cracked. It was ultimately put into trays lined with greased paper and left to solidify on cool windowsills. It might break teeth by morning. Families wrapped these shiny slabs in newspaper and took them to the fire, where they broke them up with hammers or the backs of spoons. In 1960, a pound of black trial cost $1. It cost less than chocolate, but lasted twice as long. Even after the fires went out, the scent of burnt sugar stayed on clothing. Then came parkin, the pride of Yorkshire and the heart of bonfire night baking. To make a real parkin, you need oatmeal black treacle and a lot of ginger. It was big days ahead of time to let it get better, and as the week went on, it got darker and stickier. Women wrapped it in greaseproof paper and kept it away from kids until the 5th. The Leeds Cooperative Society's cookbooks say that parkin was the most popular festival cake in the area until the 1960s. Miners brought it across the Pennines in lunch pails and paper bags and traded slices at work. Each family said their recipe was the best, and they were all right. Toffee apples were the great leveler. At least one apple would always lose its grasp and roll into the ashes on Bonfire Night. Cheap bramleys impaled on wooden sticks became gems when they were dipped in red-tinted boiling sugar syrup. Street vendors charged 3 pence each in the late 1950s, but thrifty moms manufactured dozens at home for the same price. The initial bite usually stung. The hard sugar shell broke. The chili apple hurt the teeth, but kids never forgot how sweet and smoky the taste was. Cinder toffee made chemistry fun in the kitchen. When you added a teaspoon of baking soda to boiling syrup, the liquid turned golden and lively, swelling and bubbling before turning into honeycomb. It was delicate, light as air, and hard to resist. If you leave it too close to the fire, it will melt into a sticky puddle. But if you do it right, it will snap like amber. The term arose from its hue and the fact that it was created while the bonfire cinders were still glowing outside. It was also called hokey pokey in Yorkshire and the Midlands. It was sold at fairs in paper cones long before bagged sweets became popular. Gingerbread, which was always there on November nights, was next to the syrup pans. People brought it to village gatherings and cut it into slabs or sculpted it like men with raisin eyes. Before the war, spices were quite expensive. By the 1950s, they were cheap again, and giving someone a tin of gingerbread showed you cared. Women baked it in deep trays so that they could cut it up and distribute it. The middle was soft, but the edges were strong enough to dip in tea. 1 tin of ground ginger at 9 pint may flavor 6 loaves. Some families dubbed it November cake, while others termed it bonfire bread. The sponge pudding was the best thing that came out of all that work in the kitchen. It steamed for hours and made the house warm before it ever got to the table. Mothers poured syrup on top till it shone like glass, while fathers joked that it was the only time of year they didn't mind doing the dishes. Families took advantage of the fact that sugar was once again plentiful after rationing ended. By 1963, the average individual in Britain ate 21 teaspoons of sugar every day, which was more than they had eaten since before the war. It's no surprise that the air smelled so good on Bonfire Night. Pulled toffee made sugar into a show. As their mothers plucked strands of hot syrup from the pan and stretched and folded them until they turned pale and chewy, the kids gathered around the kitchen table. Every hand that assisted left a mark, and each batch tasted a little bit different. It was complicated, hard to forecast, and hard to resist. In the early 1960s, housewives' periodicals warned that pulled toffee could produce small burns and big memories. They were both right. By the end of the 1970s, supermarkets had started to sell Bonfire Night. Instead of dishes and pans, there were wrapped toffee, box cakes, and plastic bags of popcorn. What used to be a dangerous night of making things at home, with the chance of burns, smoke, and too much sugar, became something safer but far less magical. Nothing that comes in a wrapper will ever taste the same for people who remember scraping syrup off of spoons and waiting for parkin to ripen on the windowsill. The memory stayed, but the sweetness went away. As the fireworks died down and the night grew colder, the beverages kept people close to the fire. Long after the final spark had gone out, steam rose from the flasks. The scent of cocoa and coal smoke meant it was almost time to leave. In 1958, cocoa powder cost 9 pence a tin, and practically every home stashed some beneath the sugar. If you were lucky, you may mix it with milk and a spoonful of condensed cream. It was thick enough to cover a cup. Kids held the cups with both hands to warm their fingers before taking a sip. A few droplets always fell on their mittens, and the next morning they had a brown stain that smelled like burnt chocolate. Adults liked camp coffee better. The concentrate in the bottle with the Indian soldier on it. 1 teaspoon in hot water made something that tasted a lot like coffee, but the Corey sweetness gave it away every time. It was intense, bitter, and I knew it. By 1961, camp coffee sold more than 20 million bottles in the UK. This shows that comfort was more important than authenticity. You could smell it before you saw it. Sharp, a little like medicine, and definitely British. Mothers carefully poured it and stirred it with teaspoons that made a quiet sound in the cold. People in northern towns always have a cup of hot vermetto in their hands. The purple steam coming from the fruit cordial was just as much a part of November as the fire itself. In 1957, the business started marketing it as a winter warmer. Corner stores sold it by the bottle until every flask on the street smelled like cloves and berries. It was ours, cheap and happy. Even when the cold got through clothing, the taste felt like warmth stored up for later. Adults owned moldy cider. Cloves and cinnamon were floating in foggy cider, which was slowly cooking on a paraffin burner or at the edge of the fire. The smell spread down the street, mixing with the smell of wood smoke and trial. It wasn't about drinking. It was about getting rid of the fingers that had made the fire. Farm families in Somerset and Devon made their own beer and added sugar to the rough batches to make them taste better. It was cheaper than the pub at 6p a pint and twice as friendly. There was always tea for everyone else. Every time the British went out, they brought a flask of sweet tea with them. This included trips to the beach and Bonfire Night. The first cup was bad, the final one was lukewarm, but no one ever said no to a cup. In 1964, the Gas Council did investigations on households and found that 87% of them drank tea outside at night, which was much more than cocoa or coffee. You could hear the screw top come off, the pressure release with a tiny hiss, and then the first steaming cup was passed from hand to hand. It was never about what it tasted like. It was always about being together. When the flames went out, food became simple again. Someone would cut the bread and smear the dripping on it. The fat would shine in the firelight. People got used to eating it cold at break time in the factories and mines where they worked. It got softer in the heat of Bonfire Night and tasted better than its parts promised. In 1955, a pound of dripping cost almost nothing, which was the cheapest method to feed a throng that had already spent all its money on fireworks. The last tasty things of the night were potato cakes and oat cakes fried on flat pans next to the bonfire. The sound of batter hitting hot metal broke the silence like the fire's own applause. Families in Derbyshire and Staffordshire swore by their variations, some of which were thin and crisp, and others of which were thick enough to split and butter. The smell was nicer than anything that came in a packet, and leftover mash or oats were never wasted. When the pans cooled down enough not to burn the crumpets, they came out. They were toasted on forks or skewers and soaked up butter till it spilled down their wrists and sleeves. Kids ate them too quickly and burned their tongues. For a little while, the firelight shone through the holes in the bread, making them look like lanterns. By then, the commotion had died down, the throng had gotten smaller, and just the closest families were left. Before bed, someone always cooked porridge. As elder people put it, oatmeal brose was the last warmth of the night. Stir together water, oats, and a little milk until the mixture is thick enough to stand a spoon. It wasn't very thrilling, but it was home. Scotland and the North preserved the tradition longer than the South, where instant cereals quickly took the place of the pot. Oats were no longer one of the top 10 British breakfast foods by 1975. The gradual rhythm of stirring that ended every bonfire night was also gone. The streets were quiet again when the last pan was rinsed and the ashes cooled. The smell of smoke stayed on scarves and coats for days, and school kids still found bits of ash in their pockets. Soon, council displays and pyrotechnics from the supermarket would take the place of the homemade fire. But for a generation that grew up on cocoa, bread, and firelight, November never really ended. It simply went inside.